right. I'm speaking. We are here to discuss about the management, starting with the hip and groin. In running, hip and groin injuries are a significant common problem in most of the runners. It's about 20% of the lost time in all the running injuries, and which one of the studies have also said it goes about 70% of the annually for the in the recreational runners to for the loss of time from training in running. It's basically the recurrence rate is very high. Without proper rehab, recurrence is significantly higher. Unlike sprinting, which gives you an acute injuries in the hip and the groin, it's the overuse phenomenon which is more common in the long running. If you see the epidemiology, hip and pelvis contribute to around 11% of complete all the running injuries. Though it's the silent 11%, while knee injuries are more frequent, hip and groin injuries are characterized by high recurrence, as I just said, for 33%, and diagnostic complexity. If you see, in the prevalence wise, there are 4 to 19% of male who get injured in their hip. That's what the study says, and 2 to 14% female. The risk factors are often resulting from repetitive twisting, sprinting, and kicking activities. Mechanisms: adductor longus strains are most common due to eccentric contraction during change of direction, and prognosis: early intervention prevents chronic issues up to 50% of the cases. If to note that a lot of times the running injuries are also classified as non-time loss injuries, because a lot of runners, if you see, I mean, I'm sure in the crowd there are quite a few runners who are here with a small niggle in the hip or the groin, they don't necessarily stop running. So that's why the time loss, non-time loss injuries also it is categorized into. So going into and looking at the anatomy, convergence, there are at least 36 muscles attaching and crossing the sacrum or the hip. These convergence makes it challenging for both patients and the clinicians to understand the challenge of diagnosing the proper muscle, if it is a soft tissue or related related bone or the joint. So we have usually the pubic symphysis is a clock face of the groin. It is because if you see that on the either side of the pubic symphysis, there are these muscles which are crossing. As I said, it's more than 30 muscles crossing the area. So to come to and to ease off the understanding of the injuries of the hip and groin, there was an agreement meeting on terminologies and definitions for the groin pain in athletes, which was held in 2014, and this was published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine in 2015. So here they wanted to come up with various kind of related pains, which is like adductor related pain, iliopsoas related pain, inguinal related pain, pubic related pain, hip related pain, and others. So these were the 5 categories they came up to in terminologies. And as you know, the adductor related pain was basically tenderness on the adductor longus and pain on resisted adduction. Iliopsoas, pain on resisted hip flexion and stretching of the hip flexors. Anything which was in the inguinal region, pain in the inguinal canal aggravated by the abdominal resistance of Valsalva was classified into the inguinal related pain. Pubic related was tenderness directly over the pubic symphysis or the connecting bone or the adjacent bone was there. And the other thing was the stress fractures and the intra-articular hip injuries. The stress fractures, the femoral neck and pubic ramus are the most commonest areas. They present with deep away groin and thigh pain, pain at rest at night, and inability to hop and single on a single leg. Very much found in women commonly, and intra-articular hip like the FAI, the femoral acetabular impingement and the labral tears. Mechanical impingement exacerbated by repetitive flexion. So basically, if you see the RED in REDS, which is relative energy deficiency in sport, was commonly cause of the stress fractures, and it's very commonly found in women, in the women runners and athletes, and that was the main thing as there. And this is about the C sign, which tells us about the pain in the hip joint, and which was related to the femoral acetabular impingement, and there are two different types of impingement there. In the clinical assessment, there are various tests which you do. We basically do the different angle squeeze test to understand the groin pain. We do ROM assessment, check the internal rotation. Often it is limited in FAIs. We do the Faber test. Generally it's the hip pathology. Functional hop test, essential to rule out stress fractures. Pain on landing is a significant red flag. Gait analysis. Observe the crossover gait and the overstriding. Like in the running biomechanics, you have to understand when you're checking what is the crossover gait. If the leg is crossing the midline, then it is basically called as the crossover gait, and that crossover gait is basically the cause of that can be anything, maybe the lateral hip musculature or the medial groin musculature, which is more in tension and tight. Pelvic drop, contralateral pelvic drop, Trendelenburg sign during the stance phase indicates gluteal inhibition, forcing the adductors to work as stabilizers. Before we move on, I need to make you understand that understanding the tissue symptom pattern is necessary to plan the treatments as a clinician, as a physio. If you don't understand the tissue symptom patterns, you cannot effectively understand the client's pain. There are effectively two types of tissues, as we see here. It's active tissues, which are the muscles, tendons, and nerves, and the inert tissues like the bone, cartilage, and bursae, ligament, and the joint capsule, and etc. So, in the two categories, active tissues, your pain here often changes with contraction or tension. In the inert tissues, pain here usually appears at the end range or when the tissue is stretched or compressed. Knowing the category tells you what kind of a stress caused the issue and what kind of a stress will fix it. So looking at the active tissue symptom patterns, you have to understand that the strong and painful or a local muscle tendon lesion, the strength remains but discomfort limits full output, typically an early stage strain or overuse injury. Weak plus painful, a deeper or more severe lesion near the joint. Weakness comes from the reflex inhibition. The nervous system is limiting force to protect the area. Weak and pain-free, like a rupture or a nerve involvement, the muscle can't contract, but there is no pain signal. This pattern needs further assessment before loading. These small localized pain, often due to the nerve compression or irritation near the muscle, referred pain is minimal and symptoms are specific and positional. These patterns tell you how much load the tissue can tolerate and how to progress it safely. As against the inert tissue symptom pattern, you will see pain pattern plus the limited movement feels like a hard stop, usually mechanical, a bony block or a symptomatic osteoarthritis. Mobility work here won't help, the limitation is structural. So recognizing the difference prevents the wasted time chasing the wrong fix. So if you can't really identify which tissue is involved, you're guessing and not assessing. So without that clarity, you can't predict the recovery timelines, choose the appropriate load and volume, and adjust the plan when symptoms flare. Programming for pain without understanding the tissue behavior is like driving blind. Trusted professionals don't just know what hurts, they know why, how much, and what to do next. Going ahead, I want to put stress more onto the stress fractures of the neck of the femur, which are very commonly seen in long distance runners. So most of the athletes think stress fractures happen because they usually think it is about my running volume, it is my hip flexor is tight, or sometimes I need new shoes for weeks now. But research shows it almost never that simple. Stress fractures come from the perfect storm of high load, low recovery, fatigue, under fueling, and life stress. So actually, what is a stress fracture? As we know that it's microscopic cracks in your bone caused when load is more than the recovery capacity. Why are we seeing more stress fractures now? It's basically your fitness improves in weeks, your muscles adapt in weeks, your lungs adapt in weeks, but your bones, they take months to really come back. Hybrid athletes are fitter than ever, but their bone capacity isn't keeping up. Hyrox, I'm sure everybody's heard about Hyrox training. It's basically more of hybrid training. It's a repeated cycle of fatigue, impact, and that's what is called, your bone really don't get a lot of time rest, and they are tired legs, they're less shock absorption, your femur takes the hit. Being strong doesn't mean you're safe. The fitter you are, the further you can push to fatigue. Your lungs say go, but muscles say go. But your bones say, I'm not ready for this as yet. So, in runners, what is the cause of the stress fractures? Mileage spikes, too many hard days, no deload weeks, same shoes for months, too much concrete running. Hip and groin pain that warms up is the classic early sign. You have to be aware of the early warning signs. Deep ache in the hip and groin, only hurts during running, feels like a tight hip flexor, goes away after training, and comes back faster each session. This is the window where it is still fixable. The red flags you have to understand. If you feel any of these, definitely stop your running, like pain on walking, pain at night, limping, sharp pain when hopping, or groin pain during daily activities. This is a progressing bone injury, not just a strain. Consequences are basically, if you land up with a stress fracture, 6 to 6 weeks of zero running, crutches for 4 to 8 weeks, 3 to 6 months before normal training, surgery if it is on the tension side, on the neck. Risk of avascular necrosis is also there if missed early. What exactly are the killers? So it's basically increases the fracture risk are the low carbs, low vitamin D, low calorie, low calcium, consistent fatigue, mensular disruptions, and low testosterone for men. You cannot build up or repair bone without fuel. So fuel is very important. That's one of the biggest killers. You can train perfectly, still you'll get a stress fracture because of the life stresses. Chronic stress, high cortisol, more bone breakdown. Add poor sleep to it. Poor sleep definitely is major factor. Military research has showed that 60% fewer fractures with just 6 hours sleep minimum. If you get less than 6 hours sleep, you need to be on a high alert. A stress fracture can take 3 to 6 months to recover, but catching it early will help. Catching it takes around 3 to 7 days of rest. Early groin pain, back off, no big deal, ignore it, 6 months setback. Basically, you have to have the simple maths that if you are going to having a stress fracture, you go up till and you don't look after the early signs, it is going to waste your running time for around 3 to 6 months. So, how do we fix it? Use the progressive load, manage your fatigue, and fuel up. So that's my prevention checklist. Early warning signs, how to shift the load before injury hits, recovery rules that protect your bone, fueling and sleep guidelines, red flags that mean stop now. Going ahead to the management of all the hip injuries and the groin injuries, load management is the key, and early activation is another factor where you do the isometric exercises to start with, because they give you analgesic effect and maintaining neuromuscular firing without aggravating the tissue. In the force, I mean, when you are talking about the strength, it is better to get it. I mean, in the previous session, we saw Niranjan showing us about a handheld dynamometer. So we have these various equipments which we can use to assess the strength on the either the force frame, where you can beautifully assess the strength and also train if you require for your hip musculature, and the hand and dynamometer will give us a proper assessment of the muscular strength. In the phase 2, you got to build it up. Copenhagen adductions, the gold standard of adductor strength. Start with short lever knees and progress to full lever. Gluteal capacity, very important. Everybody, I mean, since morning, I'm sure a lot of speakers have spoken about the gluteal strength, because hip and groin, I mean, gluteal is the main engine from where the force is generated for the running. Heavy slow resistance training, which can be basically used for chronic tendinopathy. Slow heavy loading is essential for tendon remodeling. Using heavy weights with a deliberate slow tempo is important when we're talking about the heavy slow resistance, because the tendon loads will only, the tendon can only get activated, and their structural changes can happen under heavy loads and slow speed, the tempo, like the typical tempo of 3 seconds into the concentric phase and 3 seconds into the eccentric phase is equal. But if you want more eccentric work, definitely your eccentric tempo should increase. Return to running. In the stage 1, you start with walk run, 1 minute run, 1 minute walk. When you basically from an hip and groin injury, you're coming back to running, you should walk 1 minute, run and walk 1 minute. Monitor 24-hour response. The pain has to be less than 2 out of 10, which is acceptable, either 2 or less than 2. So once you can achieve that, you can progress to the stage 2, where the volume can increase duration by 10% weekly. Keep flat terrain, no speed work at that moment. In the stage 3, the intensity can be increased, introduce strides, then tempo runs, last sprints and hills. I mean, it is very necessary to go stage by stage when you're returning to running, or else you will again, because as the recurrence rate is very high in the hip and groin injuries, you might not be there at the end to complete your running volume, and you might come back injured. Stage 4 is performance. Full unrestricted training, maintenance, strength work continues in that stage, and that's when you are able to be in the stage 4, then you can think about participating back into your races. So, in summary, diagnosis matters. Differentiate adductor versus hip joint versus the stress fracture. Strength is prevention. Strength is the most important thing. One of the speakers just in the before mentioned that strength is very important. Yes, it is. Weak adductors are the number 1 risk factors. Copenhagen planks are non-negotiable. Biomechanics, fix the crossover gait to offload the groin. Don't stop completely, use relative rest to maintain the tissue tolerance. Thank you.